When you hear the rhythm, start to move.
Hi everyone, welcome to Shameless Careers, a podcast about finding a career you're passionate about, or at least don't hate. If you're watching this on YouTube, please do hit the subscribe and like buttons. I honestly can't describe it to you how much it helps the episode to be recognized by algorithms and how much it helps me grow a community of people who, together with me and my guests, are trying to figure out what it takes to find a meaningful career. Today, my guest is Gilli Apter. I'm not going to do the usual lengthy introduction this time around. All I'm going to say is that when Gilli was 33 years old, she decided to become a full-time stand-up comedian. And she made it happen. In this conversation, I want to touch upon topics that don't just apply to comedy, but pretty much any career. For example, why is it so easy to get stuck and spend years, or sometimes even decades, not pursuing your dream? What to do if you are afraid that it's too late to start a new career? And importantly, what does it feel like to actually make this jump towards your dream? So Gilli, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm so happy to be here.
Let's start from the very, very beginning. Envision yourself being a child. Did you know that comedy is something for you back then already?
Yes, I mean, I think so. But what's so funny is listening to your introduction to say that at 33, I changed careers. I remember thinking then that was so old. And now when I'm 42, I know how young that is. But I didn't think so then. But yeah, I was a kid. I was a funny kid. I think I probably knew. I just knew I was a funny kid. I was always entertaining people, and I have an aunt, my dad's sister, who throughout my life has always remembered every single thing I have ever said, because I am like her favorite. I was like her favorite person, and she's always telling me all of the things that I said when I was growing up, and I was like, I was a funny kid, you know. So I think like sometimes you get that spark and you just, like, I think I knew I was entertaining. Yeah.
So basically for people who are a bit stuck in their careers and are thinking, okay, as a child, were there any prompts or signals about my future path? They should basically pay attention to what they were better at or potentially unique, right, versus others.
I mean, honestly, I think I moved away from that. Not too far away from it, but far enough away from that instinctive thing. Comedy and creative pursuits or anything that's like, I don't know, purpose-filled is very intuitive. And I think what happens is we get pulled away from those intuitions, you know, in order to make a living or to be realistic or whatever it is. You as an adult, you get pulled away from that slowly. I think I got pulled away from it because maybe one or two times I didn't have the right encouragement, or I thought maybe at some point when I was a teenager, I thought maybe I could be an actress or something. It wasn't the right thing for me, but I didn't quite get into the right lane. You know what I mean? I think maybe if I had discovered stand-up a little earlier, I don't know, maybe I would have slotted into that track, but I didn't quite and didn't get the right kind of encouragement, I think, at the right time. So I moved away from that. And also I had other interests. You know, I was a creative person with lots of other interests. And then when you're a young person, you are always being told to find something that can make you a living. So you try find a sort of a mishmash of being a creative person and making a living, and then you end up in advertising. But if you really listen to yourself, I think it is a valuable exercise to really, really, and I've said this many times before on various podcasts, that like, I think if you're really, really still and you really, really listen to yourself, you can hear and feel your instincts as a child or as a young person when you were full of inspiration, and like, what was that thing that inspired you? I was inspired by many things. You know, I wanted to be a filmmaker. At some point I wanted to be like a magazine editor. I had all these ideas, or a photographer or whatever, but I think I've landed up where I'm supposed to be.
And was there some notions of, okay, if you go into a creative profession, you won't make a living? Like, did people, your parents, discourage you from creative path?
I don't think so. I think I was never really pressured to do anything that was not, also I didn't really possess any visible skill to do anything else, Like it's not like I was like great at accounting or something like that. So it's not like I don't think my parents were like, well, we should push her into the sciences. I literally didn't do science. So I think they knew who they were dealing with, and they just wanted me to make progress in whatever I was doing. So they encouraged me to do whatever it was. I think if I had started wanting to be a stand-up comedian, they would have encouraged it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And so which path did you choose back then?
After school, I went to advertising school because at that time I knew that, you're a creative person. Maybe you like design, you like to draw, you like doing those kinds of things. How can you make a living with that? Art direction, and at the time I was really actually my dream was I wanted to go to film school, and in South Africa I at the time did no research and thought, okay, well I can't go to film school in New York City, so I guess I'll just go to advertising school in Cape Town, and with my best friend, so that was the main plan, is like, how do I hang out with my best friend and also try get a career, I don't know the priorities. I was 17. It wasn't really like I didn't have a big plan, But that didn't work out. I failed the year because I was not committed to what I was doing. It did not inspire me. And I ended up then finding a film school in Johannesburg, went to film school and did 4 years of that, and started to work in that field. I really did want to be a filmmaker, a writer, director, like that was my plan. And I pursued that quite aggressively in the beginning. And then, it didn't really pan out the way I hoped.
And what happened? And at which point did you realize that something is wrong or potentially missing and that you need to pivot?
So when I was very young and I just started out in the film industry, I had one or two amazing opportunities. And I thought I think my mentality at the time was like a lot of creative people. If I just put my head down and do my little job, like a little creative darling, Hollywood will come and like fetch me. Someone will come and get me, from where I am, and it'll just happen. And it's because I got these really amazing opportunities very early in my career. And in fact, those opportunities didn't pan out. Some of them flopped and failed for various reasons. And it wasn't because of me. It was because I was working in an industry in South Africa at the time that was flailing. I didn't realize it. I didn't realize at the time. Years later, now I look back and I go, I failed. And I'm okay with saying that I failed. But I also didn't give credit to the fact that I was in the wrong environment. And the environment at the time was not a good environment for a budding filmmaker, because we were sold this idea that South Africa was like really about to explode on the cinematic scene. But at the time, actually, what was happening was our national broadcaster was tanking, like many of our institutions in South Africa at the time. It was falling apart. And so those of us in that career were like still trudging along, thinking we were building an industry, but the environment wasn't rife for that career. And I know that now because 20 years later, there are only precious few filmmakers who exist and are still working. We don't have a thriving industry. Only now, years later, in the last 5 years, you see the industry flourishing because of Netflix and streamers and all kinds of things. But at the time, it didn't exist for a very, very long time. So I was sort of fighting against the grain. I didn't realize that I was in the wrong environment. And that is a hugely important thing to recognize in your career. Are you in the right environment for this to happen?
Yeah, so it's not just about introspection around what you want to do, but also, is that the right place for you to succeed in this,
and
right?
I did not know that when I was a young person. I did not know that. I didn't have the foresight to know that. Actually, I remember a lot of young guys would say to me, Gilli, are you going to go to LA? You should go to LA. And I was like, no, I want to build this industry here in this country with the cultural relevance of the place that I've grown up in, Why would I go to LA and make films about a culture that I don't know? But I didn't realize that it also seemed like, that's too competitive. How will I succeed in such a competitive environment where everyone is trying to do the same thing as me? But I didn't realize that a worse fate is to be in an environment where there's no competition, but also no opportunity.
So what was this trigger point that made you think, okay, now I need to change something? And what did you do?
So it wasn't so simple. Like, it wasn't like, oh, let me look at my life and assess things, you know? It's funny, like, I've never been a very decisive person. And I think that's held me back in a lot of ways. I think I would have done what I'm doing now much sooner if I had been more clear about if there was any progress happening, or, you know, if I had realized that I was not really achieving anything. But it's hard to see yourself where you are, especially as a young person, especially in your 20s. You just keep assuming that things are progressing. It's hard to know. Some people know, I guess, but it was hard for me to see that I wasn't making progress, you know? Like, it's almost like, you know, when you're swimming in the ocean and you think you're swimming, and then you look to the shore and you're in the same place, but you're working so hard, you know, but you don't realize you're not getting anywhere because the tide is against you, you know? So I think, slowly what happened to me is, like, I was doing this job. I was actually making corporate videos and commercials. I was not really making progress. I was making progress in this thing, but that's not what I wanted to make progress in. I hadn't made a film. I hadn't made a TV show. I hadn't done any work in like a decade or more, 15 years. I had never done any work really that I wanted to be doing. It was all stuff that felt compromised and felt like, oh, this is the thing you do before you get to do the thing you want to do. But actually, I was just getting good at the thing I didn't want to do, you know? So it conflated with a lot of like life situations. I was in a relationship. I went through a big breakup, like in my early 30s. And one or two other things, like personal things, happened in my life that made me realize that I needed to make some kind of life progress. At the time, I thought it was in my personal life. I wanted to get married and have kids, and I was in a relationship that felt like it wasn't moving forward. What's funny is I could recognize it in the relationship, but not in the career. In the relationship, there were goals. It was like, oh, when are we going to get engaged? When are we going to get married? When are we going to have kids? I know that there's a time limit, so I have to work according to the time limit. In your career, there doesn't seem to be a time limit, at least for a creative person, right? If you're in a corporate career, there's measurable goals that you have to hit, right? There's a corporate ladder to climb. But I think you can be fooled if you're in a creative career and think like, you know, there's also, if you're a freelancer like I was, there's no one measuring your progress. But in the relationship, I knew there had to be this, this, and this, and I wasn't getting to this, this, and this. So I went through a breakup because we weren't making progress. And after that, I had very clear goals about like what relationship I wanted, which is so funny because it's something that women are so clear on. And also, something about making that very bold move to leave that relationship emboldened me. And I think that at the time I didn't realize that it gave me a lot of courage to do other things that once you go through sometimes a breakup is like a real jolt to the system. And either you fall apart or you're like, oh, what else can I do? You know, if I did that and I'm okay, I can probably do lots of other things, you know? And then at the right time, I was sort of presented with this opportunity to do stand-up, which is something that was being primed the whole time. Like over many years, I was a writer as well, because to get into the film industry, I was writing. Now, writing was an easier way to get it. So I was making progress in my writing for television, for films. I was getting asked to do stuff, less as a filmmaker, more as a writer, because it was an easier way in. And I was then working with a stand-up comedian. I was writing for him I met him through my TV work, and he encouraged me over time to do stand-up. And I sort of always had it as this thing in the distance that I might do at some point, but I was always too scared to do it. And it was sort of around the time of the end of this relationship that I started to expose myself to the world of stand-up in Johannesburg, and I got encouraged a bit more and more. Some comedians who had a show invited me to do their show. And at some point, I just took that leap and got on a stage. It was like a lot of self-talk and a lot of like, I had written down a lot of ideas over the years of things I might say one day if I was going to do this, a stand-up. Like, So that's why I say it wasn't like I'm going to change careers at all. It was like, things happening on many different tracks at the same time. And yeah, it really wasn't like a clear-cut thing. I'm moving from one thing to another.
It's interesting you've mentioned that basically you thought that stand-up is something that you're going to do one day. And I feel like this is a bit of a trap that a lot of us are falling into, that when we're 20s, when we're in our 20s, we think, okay, there's tons of time. And I remember myself as well, like you have this time in your life where you think all doors are opened and you can just do anything. It's just, you'll decide at some point later on. But then when you hit 30, it's like the first time when you're like, okay, so I guess not all doors are open anymore and there are not all these opportunities.
Because you have this evidence, right?
Yeah.
You're like, oh, wait a minute. I thought all this stuff was going to just happen. And now I'm 30 and a lot of stuff actually didn't happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is something that you can relate to as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's funny because I like to think that I thought I had a lot of time in my 20s, but I don't think I was ever that kind of person. I remember in my early 20s thinking, okay, I'm going to start this film career. And then by the time I'm 25, I'm going to win a Palme d'Or at Cannes. And then I'm going to, you know what I mean? Like I thought by 30, I would like be the darling of the film world, you know? I don't think I felt like I had a lot of time. And I am wary to judge young people who think like, at 25, I'm so old. Because I remember feeling that way, you know? I remember feeling like I was in a real hurry to get things done, you know? And when I started stand-up, I really felt like I was in a hurry because then I thought like, oh, I'm in an industry that prizes youth, you know? It's entertainment. I'm on screens. You're on Netflix or you're in this or in that. And you have to be a young person to be in front of a camera, you know? That's who gets attention, young people in this industry. And the thing is, stand-up will disabuse you of that notion quite quickly because it takes time to get good. And what you don't want with all your youth is to be on a screen in front of millions of people and not be good yet. Like, there's a argument for not taking every opportunity that seems like it's a good opportunity that you aren't ready for. And that's something you know when you're a little bit older and more experienced.
So we have spoken about this notion of feeling stuck. Based on not just you, but also people around you, your friends, people who come to your shows, and I know in one of your shows you're telling the story about how you switched into stand-up. And you see, based on people's reaction, do you feel like this is a common problem that people have of being stuck somewhere for years and kind of being a bit lost as to what the purpose of the career is? Is it something that you observe?
Yes. I remember when I started, a few years into starting, some people I knew would come and watch me. And if it went well, if it didn't go well, it was like a disaster. Because the problem with stand-up is if it doesn't go well, people think you're a terrible comedian no matter what happens. They don't go like, oh, this is just a beginner. She'll get better. Most people are like, oh, no, that's just bad. I'm never going to go see that again because it makes them feel so embarrassed, you know. But if it went reasonably well, I would have people who knew me come up to me after the show. And I would see... it took me a long time to understand what I was seeing in their eyes. And it was the most telling of people who I had never, who were like acquaintances, but had never really engaged me. And suddenly people would really engage me. They would like seek me out to talk to me. And they would say like, oh, it's so amazing that you're doing this. What I understood after a while is that like, oh, these are people who are seeing in me somebody who is pursuing something. Maybe it's to do with age, but pursuing something at a certain point in a very deliberate way that seems like a pipe dream. Like it doesn't seem like a good idea to be suddenly pursuing a career in stand-up or in a creative field at a later point in your life. And I think people also don't give it that much credit. They more see it as like a hobby or something that, you know, they can't see the future of it. But so they're amazed that you are taking this leap and doing something that I think what it speaks to is the fact that they have something that maybe they've always wanted to do, but it's never seemed realistic. It's never seemed like there's a path to doing it. It's never seemed like they can leave whatever the thing is that they're doing, especially if it brings them an income to do another thing. I think it attacks all of those insecurities in people, you know.
And what, now that you have made this leap yourself, what advice would you give to such people?
You know, I think in some cases, it's difficult because paths are so individual, and what allows one person to do something might not allow another person to do something, you know? So advice is hard because it's hard to know where people are coming from, you know? I could think like, oh yeah, I can't say like, just leave what you're doing and start a new career, it'll all work out. Maybe you have different responsibilities to me. I didn't have a child, you know what I mean? I had parents at the time who, if things were like went haywire, I wouldn't end up on the street, you know? So I had a little bit of a safety net. So I was in a privileged position to take a different path to an extent, you know. I wouldn't be like, you know, I'd have to move in with my parents, but it's not like I could like live my lifestyle and if I failed, but at least I knew that like my whole existence would not fall apart, you know. But I think that if you have the reason not to stay in something is status, or like responsibilities are one thing and financial responsibilities are another thing, but status is a bad reason to stay in something. Like you think that it says something about you to try something new or to reconnect with an idea that you've always had. Like my advice is always like, just listen to yourself deeply. Find some quiet in your mind and listen. And because sometimes people lose touch with the thing that they're like, oh, I hate this job. I don't want to do this. But what would I do if I didn't do this? You really have to like either listen to yourself or explore things, you know, go down paths you wouldn't normally go down. You have to dig for it if it's not obvious. For me, it was pretty obvious. But if it's not obvious, you gotta dig for answers. You know, what's stopping you from digging for answers? And I think the answer to that question is like, some people know what it is and they're scared. So it operates on different levels. And some people know how much they would have to give up to do the thing that they really want to do. Because I can tell you that I have to do the thing that I'm doing on the level that I'm doing it at. I have given up every semblance of a life that I had an idea of before I started doing this. Everything. Every idea that I had of the things that I wanted when I was in my 20s maybe, or late 20s, early 30s, when you start being realistic, I have thrown all of that out the window. It's gone. There is no remnant of that life. So what does it take to pursue a thing like this completely? It takes everything. And I think some people are not willing to give up everything. And I also think that's okay. But then you have to go, okay, you know what? I'm not willing to give up everything. How do I make this okay for myself? I'm going to keep progressing and I'm going to do things that make me happy and look at life on a broader scale. Not everybody has to pursue something so singularly.
Yeah, but then what many people do is not being cool with this choice of not pursuing, but rather feel depressed and life is passing by. And when you hit 30 and 40, it still nags you that you're not on the path that you thought you would be on. So to your point, it's about making a choice, either making this jump and being cool with the trade-offs.
Yes.
Or being cool with not making this jump, but really being like fine with this, you know?
Yes. And I also think like if you're going to make a switch, just know that like, it's not like an overnight thing, you know? You can test waters and you can take another step and a step back. I didn't go into stand-up and like abandon my career and my finances and like just throw myself, you know, on the streets. You know, I wasn't like Madonna at 16 years old who went to New York City and lived on a bag of chips every day, you know. I was an adult. I had a car. I was like, you know, I was not willing to give up all my comforts immediately. So I started slowly. I did one show and then another show and then another. And stand-up and creative pursuits are things you have to get good at. And one thing I knew was that I had to have the thing that I was doing support the creative career and not the other way around. Like, I didn't want stand-up to support me because I knew that if I became dependent on it, something about it would change. So I was like, I am going to support this career for as long as I can before it supports me. I did it for as long as I could. I was like, I have to make an income to keep doing stand-up. And when you're older, you can do that because you have a car, so you can drive to the gig. You know, you have some money, so you can afford not to get paid. I think it was a good position to be in. You know, I could keep on doing the things I wasn't happy doing, but I knew that they were supporting my creative career in another space, and I got better at it and better at it and better at it. And then what happens is, when you get to a certain level in the new choice, then what would happen is I would be doing a corporate video, making some bullshit about, like, you know, a bank somewhere. I'd be interviewing like some CEO of a bank that day. And then that night I would be on stage, and slowly doing the other thing started to become unbearable by comparison. Right? And what's interesting is I didn't even really give up that career. The work just started drying up, and that's always happened to me. Whenever I have shifted my focus in another direction, the thing that I was doing before disappears. It just disappears. And slowly, that work, I stopped getting that work. And I had to start relying on the stand-up. And that's when it shifted into another gear where I had to take it very seriously. But it is that thing of like, it's not immediate cut. It's like, let me swing again. Oh, there's the other vine. I see it there. Keep swinging until eventually you're holding like the two vines. And then at some point you can let go of the one and swing with the other.
Yeah.
You know, it's a process. It's not overnight. You don't have to make a big decision overnight.
Yeah, and that's great, right? Because it gives you time, first of all, to test in case, especially if you don't know exactly what you want to do, you have time to kind of test out and see how it resonates. And secondly, I think when you are holding these both vines, to your point, at some point you don't have any doubt anymore what's the right thing to do, right?
Yes.
And I think this is the part kind of which a lot of people are stuck before this part. They like don't have this positive reinforcement from the new thing.
Correct.
And they're still kind of holding on to the other one. So that's why you need to like get to the point where this other new thing gives you positive reinforcement.
So on that, that's what made me realize, because I had these two careers running side by side, I could see very clearly that I was making progress in one that I had not made in the other. And that's what made me go, oh, I haven't made progress in a very long time. You know, I've just been treading water here. And in the other thing, I was like, oh, this is moving along. I can see that this is getting better and I'm getting more positive reinforcement. The jobs I'm getting are bigger. I'm being given more responsibility with bigger rooms. I'm, you know, going from 5 minutes to 10 minutes to 15 minutes, from being an opener to being a middle act, you know? So I'm seeing progress that I haven't felt in a long time in the previous career. Maybe I had it in the beginning, but then it's been like a decade of not much progress. And it made it so obvious to me. Before I didn't have anything to compare it to. And that's how I knew that thing was, up until that point, a bit of a failure, you know? And because I had this new thing to do, I didn't feel bad to say that it was a failure. You know, a lot of people try to say to me like, no, you didn't fail. People are very afraid if you tell them you failed at something. It's like, no, you don't say that about yourself. I'm very clear. I don't think I am a failure. I failed at something, and that's fine. That's a big distinction. I don't feel like a failure, especially because I had a thing where I was like, oh, this is what success looks like. It's progress, measurable progress. I am, even in a creative space, as a comedian, I am getting more responsibility. I'm getting paid more. These are things I can measure. In the other thing, I'm not getting paid more than I was 5 years ago. Why is that? No progress.
And do you feel that's because you have become more deliberate around it, or did it happen and intuitively see, okay, so there are some clear KPIs that are now in this industry and they didn't potentially exist before.
Yes. I could see. I think I don't know if it was because I had a stronger sense of urgency. What happens when you are in a career for a long time, especially if going from your 20s where everything feels very urgent to your 30s, you lose urgency, and also life happens. You want to get married, or you're in a relationship, or you lose that sense of focus and purpose, at least that I had when I was a teenager and in my early 20s. I had so much focus on dreams, The dreams were so alive in my mind that I was pursuing. And I think they just became a little bit blurrier, and I sort of settled into the mediocrity of what I was doing. In the back of my mind, I was like, yeah, I'm making progress. But once I was really making progress in a new career, I realized I had not been making progress. So it's like, it was just so much, I guess just because I was infused with new energy. Because that's what also, once you make a shift into something, you get new energy that you didn't know that you were going to have, that you don't have in this previous career, that's become really quite staid and boring. And especially, I think it was deceiving to me because I wasn't an accountant or a banker. It seemed like, it's harder to tell that you're not making progress. You're a filmmaker, but I'm making banking videos. What's the difference? I could have gotten a job at a bank and made more money.
But it's interesting. When you say that there is a clear sense of progress in corporate careers, that's true. Like you have, you can measure how much you get paid. You have a ladder to climb. What's interesting is that if sometimes you get stuck, or sometimes the next step of the ladder may not be accessible, because it's a pyramid, right? Not everyone can get to the top. This is where you really see that external sense of externally kind of imposed milestones are not everything. You see that people lose the sense of purpose and feel lost when they don't get this external positive reinforcement, which kind of brings us. So to me, I feel like the recipe is to have external milestones for sure, just to your point, to feel like you're progressing, but also internal sense of purpose as well. Like if you don't reach this next milestone for whatever reason, or if it takes time to do it, what keeps you going,
Yeah, absolutely. So it is difficult. It's interesting that you talk about a pyramid, like in a corporate structure. And I think that in creative careers, the pyramid is almost like the other way around, except that because it seems open-ended, it seems like anything is possible, but then you don't put any limits on yourself. You don't make goals. You're like, I want to become the most famous comedian in the world. What's stopping you from doing that? There's no corporate structure that's stopping me. There doesn't have to be one CEO here. There can be 1,000 best comedians in the world. So you don't put measurable markers on your progress. You just think, because you can also get stuck in this career thinking like, oh, if I just put my head down and work and get really, really, really good, I will be chosen, right? And I did very hard work for many, many years. And at some point when I felt I was like good enough on a level, I looked around me and I thought, oh, I am going to have to decide what the next step is, what the next level up is. Because if I don't, I will be exactly here in another 5 years. And it's because I had the previous career to know that if I didn't do something here, no one's going to promote me. No one's coming to fetch me. All of the things that seem like a promotion in a corporate career. So in comedy, that would be like, okay, first I'm doing well in the clubs. Then you become like a solid act. You get booked regularly. Then maybe you do a first appearance on local TV or something, right? Then you get to do some bigger events or corporate events or something, so you get to make a bit more money. Then maybe you're in a commercial. Oh, that gives you more exposure. Then a video of yours blows up. Then you get chosen by Netflix to do something, right? Then you get invited to an international festival. Every single thing that I am describing is out of my control. Everything. Every promotion in this creative career is out of my control. Getting chosen by Netflix to do something, I got no control over that. Getting chosen by a festival, getting a video to blow up, all out of my control. So my purpose at that point was, okay, what can I do that is in my control? And the first thing I looked at was my environment. I looked around and I was like, oh, there is a ceiling here. In this industry, in this country, there is a ceiling. Whether it's a ceiling for me personally, maybe there isn't a ceiling for other people, but for me, there is a ceiling here. How do I make sure that this is actually sustainable and growing? That was the next step. Yeah.
So what did you do to break through this?
So the first thing I
Milestone.
did, and this was like after the pandemic, when all of the comedy clubs in Johannesburg closed and there weren't a lot of options, and I think that was probably a good thing, although I did have plans to do it anyway. I had just done this 15-minute show for Netflix, and I was in a huge hurry to see what doors that could open because I knew it had a shelf life. I was like, in 1 year, 2 years, nobody's going to care about this thing. So let's see what doors it can open. And I literally went and like shopped for a new comedy scene. I was like, where can I do this? Because I'm not going to make the same mistake with my film career and stay in the same place where I'm in the wrong environment. I was like, I am in the wrong environment for me right now. I went to America. I went to London. I went to the comedy hubs. I went, and I did this because I was booked to do certain tours, and I used the money from those tours to like piggyback off an Australian tour, off a Canadian tour that I was booked to host. And I used the money from that to go to New York, to go to LA to a comedy festival. I went to London for a few weeks, and I just tried. And it was scary, I came here to London. I tried. I got on comedy shows. I went to LA. I got on comedy shows there. I went to New York. I spent a few weeks there getting on lineups. And I went around trying to figure out where I could find a home for this career. And I landed up in London through various means because I saw, oh, okay, I get on stage. It's effective. People love what I'm saying. It's a clear winner. I can work here legally. Great. This seems like a good first step.
And before we jump into kind of what this setup looks like right now for you,
Yeah.
Let's pause a bit more around any lessons that you've learned from your previous career and taking it into this career. So the first one and obvious one is this idea of progress and KPIs, and that no one is going to come up with them for you, and you need to set them up for yourself. Is there anything else that made any other lessons that you have taken from your previous industry and previous career experience in general that has made this shift a bit easier? For example, something related to resilience, emotional attitudes to what you do, like literally anything. What advantages can people expect or like have when they have done something different before?
I won't say for anybody who's done something different before. I'll say what I've learned that I think has been the biggest thing, and it hasn't made things easier. Actually, it's made things harder, which is that, in fact, I think I wanted things to be easy, and that is at odds with trying to get a career going, and maybe that's just because I think I keep telling everybody that I'm innately quite lazy, and nobody believes me because they see me working really hard. But in my film career, I had this attitude. It's attitude change. That's the biggest thing, attitude change. In my film career, for too long, I believed that if I just did good creative work, I would be, as I've said this before, I would be selected, and I would be working in a team or a producer that would pave the way for me as a creative person, right? When I see the few filmmakers who survived the period that I'm talking about where I feel I failed, the people who survived and are now filmmakers and household names understood fundamentally that the creative work and the production work had to go together. These are people who were very creative writer directors, but knew that they had to enjoy the challenges of filmmaking just as much as the creative side of it. I think I fell too much in the category of like being a creative darling, having somebody come and give me all this money to make a film, And then I could just be this creative darling. The ones that succeeded are the ones who understood fundamentally that those two things have to go together. As much as you have a vision for a story that you want to tell, you also have to have a vision of how you are going to launch this thing, because it is it's a very aggressive pursuit, and filmmaking is a competition for resources. You know what I mean? I always thought it's creative, it's uncompetitive, it's absolute bullshit. It is so competitive. You are competing for so much resource for something that no one needs, right? It could not be more competitive, right? You need so much money to make a film. I mean, do you know there are people trying to get money to cure diseases? What's your excuse, you know? So you have to be a self-starter, and you have to be passionate about how you're going to get that money, you know? It has to be part of your drive. And so when I came into this career, I, again, started to fall into that thinking of, you know, I'm just going to do this creative work and I'm going to get noticed. And I quickly had to get hold of myself and say, oh, no, absolutely not. I have to aggressively pursue the engine that's going to allow me to do this job. I have to do that. I can't rely on a booker or a talent agent or a network or a streamer. That's never going to help me progress. So it's a big attitude shift for me. I don't know how that affects people who already have a good attitude about being self-starters. But if you are already one, my God, doing the creative side is the easy part.
So interesting, because I think the notion and the concept of creative careers is the usual kind of concept of that people think about when they think about creative paths is, okay, you need to have amazing creative ideas and stuff, but you rarely think that it almost takes a skill of promoting, being out there, self-promotion, to actually make your work seen.
Yes, and also, like, I don't think people realize how much people look at people who have succeeded and they forget how much luck was involved, you know? But every single person I know who is succeeding right now in stand-up is also incredibly driven. At least the people I admire, right? Incredibly driven. You see them up there, they're like chilling, having a good time. But behind the scenes, they are doing mad stuff to make that career happen. Mad stuff. The most successful people I know in stand-up are also the most hardworking people I know. And there are a few anomalies. And those people are just lucky. And that's not the person you want to model yourself on.
Yeah. So what does this look like in practice for you now? Can you tell me about how you're making it happen, the setup that you just described?
So I was very lucky to be exposed to a way of doing what I'm doing. And this is probably, you know, we see luck as like, oh, I got chosen to be on Netflix, or I got chosen to do this, or I was lucky enough to be... let's say when I came to London, you know, I had a place to stay. That's lucky, you know. But the luckiest thing that happened to me is I met a comedian who is touring the world and has figured out how to tour and sell shows despite not being a famous person, right? So the way that I do things now is I do my own solo show in cities across Europe, and it has taken me years to try and figure this out, and I'm still figuring it out. Where I use ads. I make ads with my stand-up to sell the show in different cities, to sell tickets, right? Most of what I do now is sell tickets. I kind of sometimes joke that what I do is sell tickets, and then sometimes I also do stand-up. Because that's what my focus has become, is I have, with a lot of help and being really shown how to do this, I've been shown how to sell a show. It's very technical. It requires a lot of people's help. It requires a marketing person who I pay to figure out how to place the ads on social media. I make the ads myself with my stand-up, and I say, come to the show, and I do all these things, and then we iterate the ads because sometimes they're not working. An ad that works in Switzerland sometimes doesn't work in London, blah, blah, blah. But that's what I spend most of my time trying to crack. That and a lot of admin, booking shows, booking flights, booking hotels. And what happens is it's a very scary leap to take at first, but you do it slowly, right? You do one little show. I started this by doing the shows in South Africa. Sold one little show here, one little show there. Oh, okay, that's working. Maybe I can sell the show in London while I'm doing all the other stuff, right? While I'm performing on lineups. Maybe I can sell a little show in London. Oh, that's working. Okay, maybe I can sell a show in another city. Okay, let me try that. And slowly, the pieces come together. And now it feels like such a huge risk and an outlay of money at first and all that stuff. But then you see ticket sales coming in.
And you see progress.
Yes, literally measurable progress. And that for me is how I live my life now. Like, is the show selling or isn't it selling? Next year, can I fill my calendar with shows? You know what I mean? I've started not to be afraid to commit myself to like, okay, what does this look like realistically? Instead of, I'm going to be the greatest comedian in the world. How do you measure that?
Yeah, which comes back to what we just talked about, right? Where creativity meets practical, almost like business and entrepreneurial mindset.
Absolutely. Entrepreneurial mindset is everything. And I was always so resistant to it. I was always like, that's not me. I can't do business and numbers and like, that's for someone else. You know what I mean? It's for someone else. That's not me. I'm a creative person. I'm a comedian. That's what I do. Like, okay, well then just stay in your room, you know? And that's the lesson I had to learn. I had to force myself. And by the way, I have to keep forcing myself. I have to wake up and put myself down and force myself to do it. I have to keep reminding myself. I have to keep training myself to be the thing that I'm resistant to being, you know?
And to wrap up, what advice would you give to your younger self and to others who may be feeling stuck in what they're doing right now?
Try, push, put your feelers out. Don't think that you have to do everything immediately, but try. Especially as a young person, take big risks, take big leaps, be uncomfortable. That's the biggest thing. It's like, disrupt your comfort. I wish that I could have told my younger self to take much more risks when it came to fulfillment of career, not drugs and alcohol. That's a different story. You can do that too. But it was like, if I could have told myself not to be so afraid and not to think that I was going to take some big risk when I was older or when I had more of anything. You have to train yourself to take risks. You actually have to get good at it. You have to force yourself to do scary things constantly so that you build that muscle. It doesn't just come to you at some point.
Thank you so much, Gilli. And can you tell me, where can people find you? Where can they learn about your upcoming shows?
Yes. On Instagram, I am Gillog, Gillog. I also have a website, gilliapter.com, Gilliapter, gilliapter.com. All of my show dates are there. And I come to cities all the time, so look out for the ads. And yeah, but I think Instagram, best way to find me.
Thank you, Gilli.
Thank
It's been
you.
a super, super inspirational discussion.
I'm so glad.
Let's go.